If you'd told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting here recounting the downfall of my marriage to a room full of strangers, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, I thought I had it all. A loving wife, a cheerful little boy who called me Dad, and a house that looked like it belonged on a Christmas card. Life was good, or so I thought. Molly and I met in college. She was smart, funny, and had this way of tilting her head when she laughed that could make you forget your own name. I fell for her hard and fast, and for a while, I thought she fell just as hard for me. We got married a few years after graduation. It wasn't a fancy wedding, just close friends, family, and a whole lot of cheap champagne. But it was perfect, or at least it felt that way. And when our son, Alex, was born, I swear my heart grew 3 sizes. He was my little buddy, my partner in crime. I couldn't imagine life getting any better. But here's the thing about life. It has a twisted sense of humor. Just when you think you're standing on solid ground, it pulls the rug out from under you. The first cracks in the picture-perfect veneer started to show when Molly told me she was pregnant again. Don't get me wrong, I was thrilled at first. Another baby? A sibling for Alex? Sign me up. But looking back, there was something in her voice that day. Something shaky, almost nervous. At the time, I brushed it off as hormones or exhaustion. She was carrying a tiny human after all. Who wouldn't be a little on edge? But then the little things started adding up. The late nights at work, the whispered phone calls she said were with her mom, the sudden interest in keeping her phone locked. I told myself I was being paranoid. Molly wouldn't cheat. She wasn't that kind of person, right? Oh, how naive I was. Now, I'm not the jealous type. Never have been. But even I couldn't ignore the changes in Molly. She was distracted, distant, and honestly, not very good at hiding it. One night, she said she was going to a work dinner. Seemed harmless enough, until I checked her location on Find My Phone. She was nowhere near the restaurant she mentioned. Instead, she was parked outside some random house across town. When she got home, I casually asked, "How was the dinner?" She froze for a split second, just long enough for me to notice. "Oh, it was fine," she said, brushing past me to drop her purse on the counter. "Long, though. I'm exhausted." Something was off, but I didn't press her. At least not yet. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Accuse her of lying? What if I was wrong? I wasn't ready to face the possibility that my marriage, the life I'd built, could be a sham. A week later, I found a photo while cleaning out the junk drawer in the kitchen. It was an old picture of Molly with a guy I didn't recognize. They looked cozy, too cozy. When I showed it to her, she laughed it off. "Oh, that's just Chris," she said. "We dated in college for a bit. Nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're practically sitting in his lap." She rolled her eyes. "Jeremy, it was years ago. Let it go." So, I let it go. But the doubt? That stuck around like a bad smell. The breaking point came a few months later. Alex had been sick, just a little bug, nothing serious. We took him to the pediatrician, and during the visit, the doctor offhandedly mentioned his blood type, AB. Now, I don't know much about genetics, but I do know one thing. You can't get an AB kid from an O dad and an A mom. It's basic science. "Are you sure?" I asked the doctor, trying to keep my voice steady. "Positive," she said, not realizing she'd just dropped a bomb on my life. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought I might snap it in half. When we got back, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Molly," I said, cornering her in the kitchen, "we need to talk." She looked up from her phone, startled. "What's wrong?" "What's Alex's blood type?" I asked. Her face went pale. I don't remember." "It's AB," I said, "and you're A. So explain to me how that's possible." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time in our marriage, Molly was speechless. Molly's silence in that moment said everything I needed to know. Her face had gone ghostly pale, her hands trembling just slightly as she clutched the counter behind her. I wanted her to deny it, to laugh at me for being ridiculous, to explain how I'd misunderstood the laws of biology. Instead, she just stared at me like a deer caught in headlights. "Molly," I said again, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Say something." She shook her head, her lips quivering. I don't know what to say." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You don't know what to say? How about the truth? How about telling me whose kid I've been raising for the last 5 years? "Jeremy, stop," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, it's exactly what I think. You cheated on me, didn't you? You've been lying to me for years, and now you're caught." She took a shaky step toward me, but I held up a hand to stop her. Don't you dare try to hug me right now." For a moment it looked like she might come clean, but then she defaulted to what she does best, damage control. "Jeremy, it was a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "It happened once. I swear. It didn't mean anything." My stomach churned. "Once? You're telling me this happened once and that's how we ended up with Alex? Do you think I'm stupid, Molly?" She started crying then, full-on sobbing. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought it didn't matter. You love him. He loves you. You're his dad." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. I did love Alex. He was my little boy, the kid who fell asleep on my chest as a baby, who called me Dada before he could say Mommy. But now, every memory felt like a cruel joke. "I'm not his dad," I said, my voice cold and steady. "His real dad is out there somewhere, and you—" "What? You just decided to let me play the role because it was convenient?" She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. I was done playing nice. The doubts about the baby had been gnawing at me since Molly's confession about Alex. Sure, she'd cried, begged for forgiveness, and sworn that the new baby was mine, but how could I trust her now? Every word out of her mouth felt like a carefully crafted half-truth. One afternoon, as we sat in the living room, the tension between us thicker than the walls, I finally said it. "I need to know for sure," I told her, my voice calm but firm. "I need proof. Not just for the baby, for Alex too." Molly's head snapped up, her eyes already brimming with tears. "Jeremy, no. You don't need a test. You're his father. You've always been his father." "Am I?" I shot back, leaning forward. "Because last time we talked about this, you said it was a mistake, that Alex wasn't mine." "That's not what I meant," she cried, her voice cracking. "I only said that because you were pressuring me. I didn't mean it. I was overwhelmed, Jeremy. I was pregnant, hormonal, and you were yelling—" "Don't you dare put this on me," I interrupted, my anger rising. "You're telling me you just made it up? That you lied about the biggest betrayal of our marriage?" "I didn't lie," she said, sobbing now. I just wasn't thinking straight. You have to believe me. Alex is yours. The baby is yours. They're both yours." But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. I could see it in her eyes, the way she twisted her words, the way she avoided my gaze. She was trying to manipulate me, and for years I'd fallen for it. Not this time. Without another word, I stood up, walked over to Alex, and scooped him into my arms. "Where are you going?" Molly asked, panicking. "We're going to get some answers," I said, grabbing my car keys. "Jeremy, please," she cried, following me to the door. "You don't need to do this. You're overreacting." But I didn't stop. I buckled Alex into his car seat and drove straight to the nearest DNA testing lab. Molly called me at least a dozen times during the drive, but I ignored every one of her messages. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. 2 weeks later, the results came in. I sat in my car outside the lab, the envelope in my hands feeling heavier than it had any right to. My palms were sweaty, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. Finally, I ripped it open and scanned the results. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the paper, my mind blank. I'd known this was coming, but seeing it spelled out in black and white, that hit differently. I felt like the world had tilted off its axis, like everything I'd ever believed about my family was a lie. When I got home, Molly was waiting for me in the living room. She stood up the moment I walked in, her face a mix of hope and dread. "Well?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't say anything. I just pulled the papers from my jacket and threw them onto the coffee table. They fluttered to a stop, the bold text glaring up at her like a spotlight. She froze, her eyes scanning the page. Then she looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Jeremy, I can explain," she started, but I cut her off. "No, you can't," I said coldly, "because there's nothing left to explain." Molly stared at the DNA results like they might rewrite themselves if she looked hard enough. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, just a choked sob. Finally, she sank onto the couch, clutching the paper in her trembling hands. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice cracking. "How could this happen? Jeremy, I swear I don't know how. I don't even remember." "Stop," I said, cutting her off. "Just stop, Molly. I'm done listening to your excuses." She looked up at me, her face wet with tears. "I'm not making excuses. Yes, I made a mistake, but I can't even remember where or when. I don't know. You have to believe me, Jeremy. I never meant for this to happen." "You don't know? You can't remember?" I said, my voice rising. "Molly, you cheated on me, lied to me for years, and now you're sitting here pretending you don't even know who you were with? That's rich, real rich." She started sobbing harder, her hands gripping her hair like she was trying to pull herself back together. "Jeremy, please, you have to understand. Alex is our son. He may not be your blood, but you're his dad in every way that matters. And the baby. Don't," I said sharply, holding up my hand. "Don't you dare talk to me about the baby, because now I don't even believe that child is mine either." Her sobs turned into gasps, like she couldn't catch her breath. "No, Jeremy, the baby is yours, I promise. I know it's yours." "Really?" I shot back, sarcasm dripping from my voice. "How do you know, Molly? The same way you knew Alex was mine? Forgive me if I'm not exactly buying what you're selling." She got up, shaking her head frantically. "Jeremy, this is different. There hasn't been anyone else, I swear." I laughed bitterly. "That's what you said about Alex, and look how that turned out." "I'm telling the truth this time," she cried. "Please, Jeremy, believe me." But I didn't. I couldn't. "No, Molly. The only thing I believe is that I can't trust you. Not anymore. Not ever again." Her face crumpled, but I didn't let her interrupt. "I'm going to do a DNA test for this baby too," I said firmly. "And before you start, yes, I know I have to wait until it's born. Fine, I'll wait. But let me be perfectly clear. I'm not putting my name on that birth certificate until I have proof. If the test says the baby's mine, then we'll talk. Until then, my answer is no." Molly looked like I'd slapped her. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh, I'm dead serious," I said, crossing my arms. "And just so we're clear, I'm calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow. I need to protect myself from whatever mess this turns into. Because if you think I'm going to let you or anyone else drag me through the mud, you've got another thing coming." That's when she lost it. Molly's tears turned into full-blown hysteria. She started pacing the room, pulling at her hair, mumbling incoherently between gasps. Then she turned to me, wild-eyed and desperate. "Jeremy, you can't do this," she screamed. "You're tearing this family apart. What about Alex? What about the baby? What about us?" "There is no us, Molly," I said coldly. "Not anymore." Her face twisted in panic. "Please, I'll do anything, Jeremy. Anything. Just don't do this." I shook my head. "The time for anything was years ago, Molly. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there for a moment, watching the woman I thought I knew unravel before my eyes. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but I couldn't. Not anymore. I turned and walked out of the room, her cries echoing behind me like the final notes of a song I never wanted to hear again. The lawyer's office was nothing like I expected. I thought it would be sleek and intimidating, like the ones you see on TV. Instead, it was just a modest room with a few bookshelves, a couple of framed diplomas, and a tired-looking desk that had probably seen one too many cases like mine. The man behind the desk, Peter Marshall was in his mid-50s. After I explained my situation, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers as he considered what I'd just told him. "So let me get this straight," he said. "Your wife, Molly, admitted that your first child, Alex, isn't biologically yours, and now you have doubts about the paternity of her second pregnancy, correct?" "Yeah," I said, my voice heavy with frustration. "And I've already done a DNA test for Alex. It's confirmed. I'm not his father. But Molly's claiming this new baby is mine, and honestly, I don't believe a word she says." Peter nodded, his expression neutral. "Unfortunately, Jeremy, the legal side of this is a bit more complicated than the facts." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He let out a small sigh, leaning forward on his desk. "Let's start with Alex. In our state, if you're married at the time of the child's birth, the law presumes you're the legal father, regardless of biology. You've also acted as his father for the past 5 years, provided for him, raised him, established a parental relationship. From a legal perspective, you're on the hook." I felt my stomach drop. "You're telling me I'm stuck paying child support for a kid who isn't mine?" Peter nodded slowly. "I'm afraid so. We can argue for reduced child support based on your financial situation or other factors, but getting out of it entirely? That's next to impossible." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my hands over my face. "This is insane. She lies, cheats, and I'm the one who gets punished?" "I know it feels unfair," Peter said. "And frankly, it is. But that's the system we're dealing with. Now, about the baby." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Here, you might have a better shot." I straightened up, clinging to that sliver of hope. "How?" "Well," he said, "we can file a motion to establish your doubts about paternity before the baby is born. That way, when the child arrives, there's already a record of your concerns. This could protect you from being automatically listed as the legal father on the birth certificate. Once the baby is born, we'd request a DNA test to confirm paternity. If the test shows you're not the father, you wouldn't be financially or legally responsible." I nodded, my mind racing. "And if the test does show I'm the father?" "Then you'd be responsible," he said plainly. "But at least we'd have clarity. Right now, the goal is to protect you from getting legally tied to this child if it isn't yours." I exhaled slowly, the weight of the situation pressing down on me like a boulder. "So, to recap, I'm screwed with Alex, but I might have a fighting chance with the baby." "Pretty much," Peter said with a grim smile. "But even with Alex, we'll fight for the lowest possible child support. You don't have to accept the first number they throw at you." I sat there for a moment staring at the papers on his desk. This wasn't what I wanted. Hell, it wasn't even close to fair. But what choice did I have? Molly had put me in a corner, and now I had to claw my way out. "Start the process," I said finally. "File whatever you need to file. Let's get this thing moving." Peter gave me a firm nod. "All right, I'll handle the paperwork. Just know, Jeremy, this is going to be a long and probably ugly process. Are you ready for that?" "Do I have a choice?" I said, standing up. "Let's just get it over with." As I left his office, I couldn't help but feel like I'd just signed up for a war I wasn't sure I could win. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going down without a fight. Living with Molly after everything came out was like walking through a minefield. Every day felt like a delicate balance between keeping the peace and not losing my mind. I couldn't just leave, at least not yet. The lawyer made it clear that if I abandoned her entirely, it could come back to haunt me in court. So, I stayed, paid the bills, and gritted my teeth through every unbearable moment. Molly, for her part, acted like nothing had happened. Some days, she'd sit at the kitchen table with a mug of tea, flipping through baby name books like we were still a happily married couple planning our future. Other days, she'd lose it completely, sobbing hysterically and swearing that I was the father of both Alex and the baby. "You're being paranoid, Jeremy," she'd say, her voice trembling with desperation. "Alex is your son. The baby is yours. You're just letting all this legal stuff mess with your head." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But every time I looked at Alex, all I could see were the DNA results. And every time she brought up the baby, I could feel my trust slipping further and further away. There were days when I couldn't take it anymore. I'd pack a bag and tell her I needed to clear my head. Sometimes I'd crash at a friend's place. Other times I'd just check into a cheap motel for a night or two. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how my life had gone so far off the rails. The silence was a relief, but it never lasted long. Inevitably, my phone would start buzzing with texts and calls from Molly, begging me to come home. One night, after weeks of stewing in my own frustration, I decided to confront her again. I needed answers. Real answers, not the deflections and half-truths she'd been feeding me. "Who's Alex's father, Molly?" I asked, my voice low but firm. "And don't give me that I don't know crap. I deserve the truth." She looked up from her tea, her eyes wide and defensive. "I told you, Jeremy, I don't remember. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly." I leaned forward, my patience wearing thin. "You don't remember? You don't remember sleeping with someone else and having a kid? That's convenient?" Her face hardened. "I was stressed, okay? I don't even know if it was one time or more. I don't know." I rubbed my temples, trying to stay calm. "And the baby? Are you going to tell me you don't know about this one too?" She slammed her mug down on the table, her voice rising. "The baby is yours, Jeremy. I swear to God it's yours." "How do you know that?" I shot back. "You said the same thing about Alex, and look where that got us. What's your scientific proof this time, Molly?" Her answers became more and more absurd. She blamed stress, hormones, even some bizarre pseudoscience about how a woman's body knows who the right father is. It was like talking to a brick wall, and the more she denied everything, the angrier I got. "I can't do this," I said finally, standing up. "I can't sit here and listen to you lie to my face anymore." She followed me as I headed for the door. "Where are you going?" she demanded, tears streaming down her face. "To clear my head," I said without looking back. "Don't wait up." The next few months dragged by like a slow-motion train wreck. I counted down the days to the baby's birth, not out of excitement, but because it meant the waiting would finally be over. The moment the baby was born, I could demand the DNA test, and the courts could start sorting out this mess. When the day finally came, Molly went into labor in the middle of the night. I drove her to the hospital, my emotions a mix of dread and exhaustion. She gave birth to a baby girl, a beautiful, tiny thing with a full head of dark hair. I stood in the corner of the room, watching as the nurses cleaned her up, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of something. Hope, maybe? But it was fleeting. Molly looked at me with tearful eyes, cradling the baby in her arms. "Jeremy," she said softly, "she's ours. She's yours." I didn't answer. Instead, I turned and walked out of the room, dialing Peter's number as I stepped into the hallway. "It's time," I told him. Molly knew the storm was coming long before the baby was born. Peter and I had filed a motion challenging the paternity of the unborn child and initiated divorce proceedings. She tried to act like it didn't bother her, walking around the house with her chin held high, pretending she was unshaken, but I could see the cracks. Late at night, I'd hear her on the phone, whispering to someone in a voice thick with anxiety. It didn't take long to find out she'd hired her own lawyer, and not just any lawyer, a sharp, expensive one who clearly knew how to play dirty. When the baby was born and the DNA test confirmed what I already suspected, that I wasn't her father, it should have been the final nail in the coffin. But no, that was just the beginning of the circus. The courts didn't care about betrayal or broken trust. They cared about money, assets, and who would take care of the kids. And Molly? She had no shame about playing the system for everything she could get. The court proceedings were brutal. Peter warned me they would be, but nothing could have prepared me for the sheer absurdity of it all. Molly's lawyer didn't waste any time painting her as the victim, a vulnerable, misunderstood woman who'd been unfairly vilified by her paranoid and controlling husband. "He's been emotionally manipulative," her lawyer declared, gesturing toward me like I was the villain in some soap opera. "Molly has spent years trying to protect her marriage, despite being subjected to baseless accusations and threats of divorce." Baseless accusations? I nearly laughed out loud. The DNA results were right there, clear as day, but Molly's lawyer waved them off as if they were a minor inconvenience. Instead, he leaned into a narrative about a woman who'd been pushed to her emotional limits by a husband who didn't understand her needs. "She's not perfect," the lawyer admitted, in a tone that made it sound like they were confessing to jaywalking, not years of infidelity. "But who among us is? She's a mother, Your Honor, a loving, dedicated mother who only wants what's best for her children." Meanwhile, Molly sat there, nodding along like some tragic heroine. When asked about the DNA results, she shrugged it off as a string of unfortunate coincidences. "I never meant to hurt Jeremy," she said, her voice trembling with rehearsed sincerity. "I don't even know how this happened. I just want to move forward for the sake of our kids." It was infuriating, but Peter had warned me to keep my temper in check. "Let them dig their hole," he'd said. "The facts are on our side." The results were a mixed bag. The court acknowledged the DNA test for the newborn and ruled that I wasn't her father, which meant I dodged a lifetime of child support for a baby that wasn't mine. But when it came to Alex, I wasn't so lucky. Despite the DNA results, the court declared me his legal father. Peter explained that it boiled down to one thing. I had been Alex's dad in every practical sense for 5 years. I'd raised him, provided for him, and established a bond that, in the court's eyes, outweighed biology. "You're still his father, Jeremy," the judge said, her tone laced with a sympathy I didn't want. "And he deserves your continued support." Support. That word took on a whole new meaning as the financial battle began. Molly's lawyer hammered home the point that she was now a single mother with 2 young children, one of whom had special needs for therapy and schooling. I, on the other hand, was a working professional with a steady income. Never mind the fact that Molly had torn my life apart, I was still expected to foot the bill. The division of assets was equally brutal. Molly got the house, most of the savings, and the bulk of our joint possessions. I walked away with my car, my personal savings, and a mountain of resentment. The worst part? The child support. The court hit me with one of the highest percentages they could legally impose. At first, it felt like they were taking half my paycheck. Every month, I watched my hard-earned money go straight into Molly's bank account, knowing full well she'd use it to maintain the life she'd built on lies. But Peter didn't give up. Over the next few years, we filed multiple motions for modification. Each time we presented evidence of my financial strain and argued that the initial ruling was excessive. Slowly, painfully, we chipped away at the number, bringing it down bit by bit until we finally reached the minimum allowed by law. It wasn't much of a victory, but at least it was something. For the first time in years, I could breathe again. Those years were the darkest of my life. I lost a lot: my marriage, my trust, my money, but I kept one thing: my freedom. And that was worth every fight. Looking back, it's hard to believe I survived all of that. The court battles, the lies, the financial strain. It felt like a never-ending avalanche of misery. But life has a funny way of surprising you. After everything I went through, I came out on the other side stronger, wiser, and, dare I say, happier. For starters, I got my finances back on track. Sure, I'm still paying child support for Alex, but it's manageable now. And honestly, I don't even think about the money anymore. I've built my small business, and I'm doing better than ever. But the real game changer? My love life. After the divorce, I threw myself into dating, not out of desperation, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to just enjoy someone's company. Let me tell you, dating in your 30s is a whole different ballgame. Women would look at me, raise an eyebrow and say, "So you've been divorced. What's the story?" I got pretty good at giving them the short version. She cheated, I left, the end. It wasn't always smooth sailing. I had a few relationships that didn't work out. Some ended amicably, others not so much. One woman asked me about marriage on the second date. You know what I did? I smiled, paid the check, and politely said, "It was lovely meeting you." Then I never called her again. Marriage to me became a 4-letter word. I'd hear it, and my fight-or-flight instincts would kick in. mostly flight. But then I met Kate. She wasn't like anyone else I'd dated. For starters, she didn't care about the whole divorced with baggage thing. She found my sarcastic sense of humor hilarious, and she had a wit sharp enough to keep me on my toes. She also had her own complicated past, so there was no judgment between us. We've been together for a few years now. We're not married, and that's exactly how we like it. We live together, share the bills, and argue over whose turn it is to take out the trash. But the word marriage has never come up, and that's not because we're avoiding it. It's because we don't need it. Kate likes to joke that I'm allergic to paperwork, and honestly, she's not wrong. But the truth is, I've learned that love isn't about contracts or ceremonies. It's about trust, respect, and showing up for each other every day. Kate doesn't need a piece of paper to prove she loves me, and I don't need one to prove I love her. Life isn't perfect, it never is, but it's pretty damn good. I've got my freedom, my sanity, and a partner who makes me laugh every single day. Sure, I still roll my eyes whenever someone mentions the word marriage, but at least now I can laugh about it too. The way I see it, I've already done my time in the trenches of bad relationships. I've been lied to, cheated on, and dragged through the mud. And yet, here I am, alive, kicking, and maybe even thriving. If that's not a win, I don't know what is. So, to anyone out there dealing with their own version of my story, here's my advice. Life gets better. It won't happen overnight, and it sure as hell won't be easy, but you'll get there. And when you do, you'll realize that freedom and happiness are worth every fight. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.